people back if they're not that way inclined. Thank you very much for getting in touch on that one. But look, the Prime Minister has hinted that the UK could start paying countries. This is all about trying to stop migrants crossing what they call upstream. Remember that they did some of this in Italy, didn't they? We would be looking at countries like Vietnam. Is this a good idea, good policy move in your view?
I think it works for a country like Italy in a way that it's not going to work for the UK, partly because the deals that Italy have done with Albania for repatriation and with Libya and Tunisia, Italy effectively shares borders with them. I know the Mediterranean is in between, but actually it's a very simple A to B route for a lot of these people. So Italy can monitor in real time what it's doing. And also, part of the deal that Italy has struck with the two North African countries is that it's going to train and supply the coast guards of both countries, the authorities, so it can keep a very close eye on what's going on. But that's, as I say, it's the A to B movement from North Africa directly to Italy. It has worked up to a point. I think they've cut crossings, the number of people, by almost 60%. But if you're talking about the UK, which is, a measure further away in terms of the countries that we're talking about, Vietnam, Iraqi Kurdistan, it's much harder, actually, I think, to put your fingers on exactly the moving parts. There are many, many countries in between, all along that supply chain. The country that actually we should just be dealing with, if that's what we want to do, is France, because that's the A to B in this
But we've been giving France millions.
Exactly, and it's not working. So the solution is, in fact, to just deport more people, ultimately. It's not like...
Well, you say the solution is to deport people.
It's not like, let's be clear, it's not like Vietnam is a failed state. It's not like it doesn't have functioning airports. It's not like it's going to turn its own citizens away. It's also not like parts of Iraq aren't perfectly fine these days to do so. You can fly into Iraq perfectly fine. We have diplomatic relations with these governments. You can deport these people. We choose not to. Most other countries around the world actually think that that's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, even if it breaks international law. They ask questions later, one of which happens to be Italy, another one happens to be France. But that's more sort of the point, is that actually most other countries, they just get on and do it. They do the dirty work. And it must be said, as part of this, Italy, dealing with Tunisia and Libya, is dealing with governments that most human rights organisations around the world go, this money is going to go towards abusing these people's human rights. Italy doesn't seem to have a problem with that.
But you said deporting people is the only solution here. Again, yeah. I listen to my viewers every day, and some of these people at home, I think your microphone's crackling up, so I'll just sort that out, and I'll lean towards Aaron for this. Some of my viewers will be shouting at their screens saying deporting people isn't just the only solution, because many would argue that there hasn't been enough consideration done about turning these boats back, stopping people actually reaching the shores in the first place. What do you think to that?
Oh, well, I wouldn't even go that far. So I think the case of Libya is really intriguing. We removed Gaddafi, I believe, in 2011, 2012, and then you get what's been commonly referred to as the European refugee crisis in 2014, 2015. And there's a direct relationship between those two things. And I've spoken about this many times with you, Michelle. I think we broadly agree on this. There is clearly some sort of a connection between failed foreign policy and migration flows into Europe. Now, we can have a debate about how bad that is, but it's clearly a thing. And what you're seeing with the story on Libya and Italy is that it's in Europe's interest, our rational self-interest, to have safe, solid, reliable, moderately prosperous countries in our near abroad. What we've done for much of the last 25 years is bomb, invade and occupy them.
Yep.
So I think that foreign policy and migration go hand in hand. As Benedict says very quickly, Vietnam is a really nice country, actually.
Beautiful. I travelled solo around it in 2018.
They're about to get high-speed rail. They're doing pretty well. So that is a very strange one. The Libya deal is interesting as well, in so much as obviously people are going to Italy but then passing on to France, Germany, etc. So if Italy, Greece get these kinds of deals, that also benefits
but you've
the likes of Northern Europe.
Point as well, when I was saying to you that everyone just seems to be uncomfortable with exploring the possibility properly of turning these boats around. Why?
What do you mean?
Well, I mean,
physically turning around them in the water. Well, I suppose that's because it's technically quite challenging, isn't it? You'd rather than not get in the water at all.
Well,
that's why
I don't know if it's technically challenging, and I would argue that there doesn't seem to have been enough exploration of that as a potential solution.
So let me start with two things. Firstly, I don't think it's sensible for anybody to suggest that people cross the English Channel. It's a very busy route. It can be very treacherous weather. That should not be happening. The French government and the French Coast Guard should be ensuring that does not happen. It's not safe for those people. But I do also think that that's relatively small fry, and it's tens of thousands of people. It's a lot of people. But if you look at the long-term trend, Iran has 90 million people. Egypt has 100 million people. Pakistan has 250 million people. We need these countries to be safe, secure, subject to a rule of law, Moderately
Yes,
prosperous.
but again, you're
prosperous.
avoiding my point, because my point is a
Well,
simple
that's
one.
450 million people.
If those boats were not allowed to reach the UK shores, well, I'm telling you now, you'd dry up your business of people smuggling in an instant. If you knew that you are not going to make it to the UK, end of story.
Well, that's what Benedict is suggesting, though, that you
Yes,
just
but
deport
why
people that
isn't
come
it-
here.
It's more of a
deport them. I'm saying stop the boats
It's
before they
more of
get
a practical
here.
point. The Greeks tried to do this, and it lands you in all kinds of hot water because people end up dying. What you have to do is disable the motors, turn them around, and
No,
push them. And
people end
actually,
up
in a
dying
24-mile,
now, Benedict. People are dying now.
more people would die if you disabled the motors. Basically, given that these things are overcrowded, you'd end up having to take people anyway because often they are.
Do you think
overcrowded
this solution
deliberately
has been
done so.
explored properly?
No, of course it's not, because it
Why?
wouldn't work. Because if you push
How
them
do you
back to
know
France,
it won't work if it hasn't been explored?
as I say, more people will end up dying in the Channel. That's not
how do you
actually
know
something,
that?
because this is what happened in Greece. This is what happened when the Greeks started pushing people back towards Turkey, and more people ended up dying. If you disable the motors, which you have to do because otherwise they just keep on going, then you're leaving them basically at the mercy of whether or not the French authorities turn up on time, whether or not they get hit by something, whether or not they get capsized by a wave.
Quickly,
What you do
realise
is,
if these boats are not going to make it, I'm not going to get in them.
Yeah, but if you just deported people, if you picked them up, you took them to a holding centre and you say, right, you've entered the UK illegally, congratulations, within a week you'll be gone, you have the same impact. Now, maybe it cost a little bit more in the short term, but fewer people would die, and it does have the same effect of basically saying, you've spaffed a load of money, you've lost a load of money coming all of this way, it's been very futile, and now you're going back to Vietnam. It's the same basic principle, but it's slightly less dangerous than just saying, in one of the world's busiest shipping lanes, off you go back to France. Hopefully the French Coast Guard pick you up. Maybe they don't, but it's not really our problem.
Well, you wouldn't just push them back, would you?
That's literally what happens. No, that's literally what happens, though. That's literally what the Greeks
Well,
did.
you can tell me at home, do you think, well, just because the Greeks did it that way doesn't mean you have to emulate that model.
So
what
we
I'm
would
arguing
tow
is that
them illegally back into French territorial waters, showing the world that we were doing
What I'm arguing is I don't believe there has been a serious conversation to explore whether or not it is a physical possibility to do this and how it could work, if it could work. I don't believe that conversation has been properly and sensibly had.
But Michelle, you're really on top of this. You talk about this a lot. I mean, on some days in summer, the number of boats coming over is really significant.
As it currently stands, because they know that when they make it to the UK, they'll be in a 4-star hotel before their feet can hit the ground.
But we're talking on some days, I mean, I don't know the numbers. I think some days, we're talking about hundreds of boats on the worst possible days. The idea that you'd be able to turn even half of those back seems implausible to me.
Well, if you started enacting that kind of policy, if it was explored and believed to be able to be done in relative safety, if you started enacting that now during the quieter periods, you wouldn't have a situation where hundreds of boats would be flocking over in your high-volume summer months, would you?
Well, you tell me. I think it's a combination of all these things. But I think Benedict's right. I mean, look, you wouldn't want to be in number 10 when, let's say, a boat with 60 kids and women sinks in the middle of the English Channel because the Royal Navy turn them around. You wouldn't want to be.
Good luck finding a boat with 60 kids and women in that. That's what I'd say, because they're all predominantly men. That's the first thing I would say. And if we're going to keep asking British taxpayers, where we're so skint that we can't even heat our own pensioners in the winter, apparently, if you're going to ask us to be in that situation and continue finding millions and tens of millions to try and solve this issue, then I think we should be shown that all routes to stopping this have been actively, proactively explored. And I would argue that current option that I'm suggesting has not been, certainly not in the public domain, accurately and thoroughly explored. It might come to nothing. There might be no way at all that it is possible humanely or legally or whatever to be done. But I'm putting it to you, and you can decide whether I'm right or wrong, that it has not been publicly explored. I'll tell you something that was publicly